Hello YouTubers! Today we'll be changing out the rear brake pads on my wife's 2015 Buick Encore and I'll show you how it's done, so let's get after it. On this model of Buick, the handbrakes are activated on the rear brake only. Since we'll be working on the rear brakes, I'll need to release the handbrake so the rear brake pads aren't pressed against the brake rotor. You may wish to check your owner's manual, but typically the jack points on most American vehicles are indicated by notches along the rail as shown here. This factory scissors type jack has a couple of indentions with a saddle in the middle. The saddle fits into the notch in the rail. Screw the jack up to and around the notch if possible using your fingers. While the vehicle is still firmly on the ground, loosen all the lug nuts. Loosening the lug nuts now prevents the car from rolling off the jack when the vehicle is fully lifted due to the extra pressure placed on the lug wrench. Because I'm at home, I'm going to utilize my breaker bar for better leverage. I'm going to take the extra step of placing a couple of bricks on either side of my front tire to act as wheel chocks and prevent the vehicle from rolling off the jack. At this point, I'll continue to raise the jack and I check every so often to see if the tire will rotate. When I can spin the tire with my hand, it has been jacked high enough. Again, because I am at home, I am integrating the use of my safety stand. Continue to remove the lug nuts. I like to save the top lug for last so I can press in on the bottom of the wheel and take some strain off the threads. The wheel is lifted off the lugs and set aside where it won't roll away. Check to see that the rotor can spin freely. Unlike the front brake job where I remove the caliper separately from the bracket, here on the rear I'm going to remove the entire caliper and bracket assembly together. If you were going to remove the caliper first, then loosen this 10mm nut here, then remove this low frequency noise damper at the top. This noise damper is billed as a device that eliminates moans and squeals during soft braking at low speeds. For our purposes, we'll begin by removing this caliper bolt at the bottom, and then the one here at the top. Then we'll slide off the caliper and bracket assembly from the rotor. I'm able to loosen and remove these bolts by using a rubber mallet on my socket wrench handle. Now, if you have a powerful impact wrench, this would be the time to break it out. Notice the evidence of old blue thread lock. Repeat the operation on the bottom caliper bolt. Because of the tight fit, I'm going to break loose the bottom bolt with just my ratchet handle. However, there's not enough space to back the bolt all the way out using this method. So, I'll now install my 1/2-inch extension and feed it beside the rear shock absorber and through the brake cable to finish removing this bolt. This entire assembly, which holds the brake pads, can now be slid sideways off the rotor as shown. Now, this caliper is pretty heavy and we don't want to just let it drop to the ground and perhaps damage our rubber brake lines, so I'm going to cut a coat hanger to use as strain relief. One end of the hanger is wrapped and tied around the coil spring, and the other around the upper caliper arm. For video clarity and ease of access, I'm also raising the assembly into the air using my floor jack. The inner pad can easily be wedged out by inserting a flat-bladed screwdriver. Note the ears on the pad at the top and bottom that fit into the metal clip channels. Also note the silver-colored scraper on this pad only. Additionally, this male pin fits into the caliper piston here. The outermost or front pad can be punched loose with a screwdriver like this. This brake piston is currently extended. Eventually it will be retracted to allow room for the new brake pads. For the new pad to fit properly, the piston receptacles must be aligned with this marker on the bracket. Before I retract the brake piston, I'm going to need to locate the brake's master cylinder and remove the cap to allow for a fluid expansion. Now, if you don't recognize the term brake master cylinder, just locate the place where you would add brake fluid. My retracting the caliper piston will cause the brake fluid to rise here and perhaps spill over the top, so I'm going to wrap a towel around this area just in case, as this fluid is caustic to paint. Unlike the front brake pistons, which can just be retracted by pressing them straight back into place, the rear pistons must be screwed clockwise. Some YouTubers have shown homemade tools they use for this, but for $12 you can buy this tool at your local auto box store. Note that it has 6 sides like a die, and each side has a different pin configuration. This one is made especially for imports, Chrysler, Ford, and GM models. I begin by turning the tool until I find the pin configuration that matches the face of my particular piston. Lift the tool in place through the bracket and set it on the face of the piston. The goal is to find the fit that is the most snug. My piston face has 2 slots, and obviously this side of the tool has 4 pins, so that won't work. Let's try this one. That's the one. Now, thread your socket extension through the bracket and into the caliper tool like this. Attach your ratchet handle to the extension and begin to turn clockwise while applying pressure inward. Apply opposite pressure from the back side of the caliper. The caliper tool may want to pop out of the piston slots, so beware. This action is going to cause the fluid to rise in your brake reservoir. If you decide to apply any kind of lubricant or grease to the edge of the piston to assist with turning during this step, just be sure and not get the lubricant on the face of your new brake pads. Our goal here is twofold. First, we want to turn in the piston until the face is flush with its collar, and lastly, we need the slots in the piston face to align with the mark on the bracket as shown earlier. Here you can see I turned it too far, so I'm going to rotate the piston one more time. If you recall, this step allows the pins on the back of the new pad to seat properly. Now that is what I'm after. During the front brake job, I didn't swap out these clips because quite frankly my new front pads didn't include them. Since they were included with this order, I'm going to show you how to swap them out. Grab a flat-bladed screwdriver and pry off the old clips like this, paying attention to the orientation. These are sharp, it's a good idea to wear some gloves. These clips have so many bends in them, I find it easier to immediately compare and orient the new one as soon as the old one is removed. I recommend application of some anti-squill material to the back of your new inner brake pad, but I do not recommend this brand. Apply a liberal circular coat of this material around the area where the piston presses against the pad and allow 15 to 30 minutes for the product to tack up before installation. Also note that only the inner pad has this metal scraper on it. If this was the front end, I would by default remove this rotor and have it turned on a lathe at my local auto parts store. For rear rotors, I have my own litmus test. Can I feel grooves cut into the surface, or am I feeling a pulsing sensation in the brake pedal while applying the brakes? If yes to either of these, I would first remove this Torx screw, then the rotor would come right off. This rotor is fine, so I'm not having it turned. The CRC material is tacky now, so the new inner pad is installed so that the material faces the brake piston. Press the ears on each end of the pad into the channels of the metal clips like this. A flat-bladed screwdriver wedged against one end of the pad ear can provide leverage to seat the pad into place. Press the inner pad backwards until it will slide in no further. The outer pad has pins also, but they don't fit into anything. Nor does this pad have a scraper. You may choose to place anti-squeal material on the areas of this pad where the two caliper arms touch it, but I chose not to. Mounting this pad proved a little more challenging, and I ended up using some needle-nosed pliers on the pad ear to coax it into place. Then I was able to finish by using my fingers. The caliper and bracket are now ready to remount, so I began by removing the coat hanger used as a strain relief. Since we rotated the brake piston inward all the way, I should have plenty of clearance to slide this assembly back onto the brake rotor. The topmost bolt is now reapplied first, then the bottom. Alternate the tightening of the bottom and top bolts. This is a shot of the reassembled brake caliper and bracket onto the rotor. The car's wheel is replaced and the lug nuts lightly tightened for the moment. Snug up the lug nuts while the wheel is still in the air. The safety stand is removed, and the jack is lowered until the tire touches the ground. At this point, the lugs are fully tightened, and the jack is lowered and removed. The bricks I used as wheel chocks are removed as well. Be sure to crank the vehicle and gently pump the brakes before driving. This action causes the brake fluid to return to its normal level. Pumping the brakes now also causes the caliper piston to press against your new pads prior to driving the vehicle. When finished, replace the cap on the brake master cylinder and remove the towel. And this project is complete.